Hello everybody, Sparkster1701 here. And this month we're going to take a look at the Decepticon Commandos from the Robots in Disguise line from 2001 and compare them to their most obvious counterparts, the Generation 1 Combaticons. So the first one we have up here is Armorhide. Armorhide would be released in 2001, along with the other Commandos. It would likely stay on the shelves until 2002. However, in 2003, two multi-packs would be released featuring the Commandos, and they would have them in different camouflage. This here, however, is the standard retail version, although the Japanese version of this toy, which was called Dangar, was released in a more desert camo color. But of course, one of the Walmart exclusives that was released in 2003 also featured this toy in desert camo. Unfortunately, we don't get a whole lot of background into Dangar due to the way the packaging was set up for the toys. But it is said that he prefers active aggression over elaborate planning. So how does that make him compare to his G1 counterpart, Brawl? The only real thing is the fact that they both do seem to prefer being in the thick of action, as Brawl is described as having a hair-trigger temper and being resistant to most conventional artillery. Whereas it's said that Armorhide enjoys a few more brilliant tactics, such as hiding underneath the desert sands and leap out at an unsuspecting target. So if nothing else, Armorhide comes off as a little bit smarter than what Brawl does. But at any rate, let's take a look at Armorhide's articulation, and it is pretty much the same as what you would have found on Brawl. Namely, due to the fact, this toy's relatively new, so he's a little stiff. You can rotate his arms at the shoulder. You can go at least about to there. The tank turret gets in the way. And they can rotate back, again, only as far as the tank turret. And you can bend his legs at the knees to kind of make him look like he's running, but unfortunately, he has no way of balancing himself. But if you put them both down, you can get him into a decent kneeling position. All we need is a bunch of Legos in front of him to look like a barricade, and there you go. Not too shabby. Now, to transform Armorhide, it's pretty much the exact same way as you would on Brawl. First thing we got to do is remove his gun. Second, we grab his tank turret and we pull it out a little bit. Looks like it is out all the way. And we're going to bring his arms up to level him with his chest. And then we fold the chest up over his head and very slightly push it downward. We come back here, we fold his legs up at the knee, like so they slip in there, and then now is when we push the front end in to lock them all into place, and then push the turret down. And we have him in his alternate mode, a tank, but since he's a repaint of Brawl, he is based on a real tank, specifically the Leopard 1 tank. He does have a fully rotating turret, so that's always nice. Unfortunately, he still has the fake treads underneath him, so he gets along with these little wee wheels. And how well does he roll on those? Rolls pretty good. Of course, for additional firepower, he also includes this larger cannon that can be mounted on his backside. Now, granted, when he has that, it does limit his field of fire because he can't shoot straight behind him. But as this can raise up and goes back about that far, that does give him an anti-aircraft weapon. Very much similar to his G1 counterpart. However, there is a difference this time around on Armorhide than there is on Brawl. Armorhide's cannon has been modified with a little extra plastic in here between these barrels, and there's a little tiny hole in there which will allow you to mount his regular pistol inside there for extra firepower, giving Armorhide the ability to hold all of his weapons in tank mode. So quite a nice improvement. Whereas the original Generation 1 toy had nothing in there between the barrels. Well, there was very thin plastic, but there was nothing there that would have supported holding his gun. I mean, of course, he could do it, but it's held in there very loosely, so it wouldn't necessarily look right, and the slightest movement would knock it out of him. So it's nice to see that Hasbro at least took the time to make the improvement on him for Armorhide, as in the G1 line, Brawl here was the only one of the Combaticons that really didn't have a way to hold all of his weapons in either mode. He can only hold one in each mode. So it's nice to see that that's a slight improvement. Now let's take a look at Armorhide's loose pieces, starting with his gun, which the wiki, unfortunately, we don't have anything on the toy itself. The wiki describes this as a pistol. And as you can see, it's done up more in a very dark grayish color, almost a rusty looking color, whereas compared to Brawl's gun, which was done in almost black plastic. Well, it's actually very dark gray, but probably looks on the camera as black. But as you can see, they are more or less the exact same shape. Although there is a difference here on this side that you can probably see here on the camera. The hole here on the side, on the right-hand side of the gun, it looks to be noticeably bigger on Armorhide's gun than it is here on Brawl's gun. I don't know if that's coming off very well on the camera, but if you've got both of them together like this, you will kind of notice that it is slightly bigger. And then, of course, we have the large cannon, which is also molded in the same color. And you can see how it compares to Brawl's gun. So the biggest noticeable difference, especially when you hold it at this angle, as you can see, Armorhide has the extra plastic in there to hold the gun, whereas Brawl does not. And of course, again, this gun does rotate. Pivots on its hinge, goes up that far, points down that far, but kind of pointless to go down that far because it can only be mounted in the one way. But there we go. Those are Armorhide's pieces. Unfortunately, with this wave of the Transformer toys, the tech specs have long been phased out. And unfortunately, as I've kind of stated before on other videos that I've done on many of the modern toys, I do think that's a bit of a crime to do to the toys, as back in the day, that was one of the things that helped make the Transformers a step above the GoBots. Hasbro took what they did with G.I. Joe in creating the file cards and applied it to the Transformers with their tech specs. We got some idea as to who they were and what they were capable of doing for their respective armies. With this, all we have to go by is usually the nonsensical cartoons that were released at the time, or the comic books that these characters might have appeared in. But in a lot of cases with those, the writing staff were two different sets of people, so you would get a lot of conflicting information. So that makes it hard to do a full accurate comparison between these toys. Plus deprives me of giving you something else to listen to during this video. So we'll just cut down to my thoughts. What do I think of Armorhide? Well, Armorhide is a slight improvement over Brawl. I will give it that much. From what little that I've read about him, he seems to come off as being smarter than Brawl. But of course, Brawl only had a 2 on his intelligence in the G1 line, so it's not going to take much to be smarter than him. Seriously. The repaint, it's not bad. I would not have chosen the blue color, but I do like the attempts to give him some camouflage on there with 2 different types of blue paint. That does work, and they got a few splotches of white or light gray on him that's to try to be indicative of battle damage, and that's a nice touch too, because it kind of goes along well with what they're doing right now with the Siege line. As for him being a straight remold, well, that's up for debate. As in 1992, that's what led to the final demise of the Generation 1 line in Japan, was due to the fact that by then they were re-releasing, just remaking toys with the same molds, and in a few cases they weren't even bothering to paint them in different colors from their original versions. So it was like, how do you tell which one's which? But in this case, well, it's a tough debate as to say whether or not this was a good idea to do just do a straight repaint of a G1 toy. I mean, yeah, it's got its ups and downs, but I do like the improvements that they did on the paint job here, and of course the improvement to the mold of the cannon here. This additional hole in here to hold the gun, that was a nice touch. Somebody was on their game that day when they came up with that. But of course, that also has more functionality, and you'll see that further on in the series this month. Overall, though, I'm still going to put Armorhide about in the middle tier. He's certainly not a top-tier worthy toy by any stretch of the imagination, but I like the improvements enough not to really throw him down on the bottom tier, since obviously somebody did do a little more thinking when they decided to reissue this toy as a different character. So, nice job, Hasbro. You did something right this time. And that's going to conclude my review of Armorhide and his comparison to G1 Brawl. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you liked this video, please leave me a thumbs up here on YouTube. If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button down below and join up in our ranks. Don't forget to also ring the notification bell so you'll be notified when I post new content. Also, please consider sharing your thoughts about Armorhide, and Brawl in the comments section down below. This is Sparkster1701 saying I will catch you all later.